The Resident Evil 4 Remake is right around the corner. And while I'm not totally sold on the idea of the original game needing this treatment, that doesn't mean I'm not super excited to get my hands on it and experience what nearly 20 years of advancement in video game technology can do for one of the most beloved and highly rated video games of all time. In anticipation of this release, I thought I'd share what I consider to be the top 5 things I'm looking forward to in this remake. Let's get started. Number 5. Additional lore. Video game remakes are a prime opportunity to add new information, interpretations, and perspectives to an existing story. For instance, in Resident Evil 2002, we got the tragic story of the Trevor family, whose demise at the hands of Oswald Spencer led to one of the most iconic enemies in the series, Lisa Trevor. In Resident Evil 2 2019, we get a better look at the relationship between Annette and Sherry Birkin, as well as more interactions and values for characters like Marvin. In Resident Evil 3 2020, we get to see Jill as she is experiencing the beginning of the outbreak in Raccoon City, unlike the original game where we just start right in the thick of it. We also get more screen time with Carlos and Robert Kendo, as well as a sympathetic end for original STARS member Brad Vickers. The remakes are not without fault, however, as many people were upset at the removal of certain locations and pretty botched A and B scenarios. What I'm really hoping to see in the RE4 Remake is a better look at the personalities and motivations of characters like Luis and Ashley, or even villains like Chief Mendez and Salazar. Given what we've seen from Resident Evil Village, I'm also looking forward to more potential story tie-ins to the lore that's been established in recent games. Number 4. The Merchant. You know him, you love him, he's always there for you. That's right, it's the Merchant. Possibly one of the best things to come out of RE4 was this enigmatic character who shows up out of the blue, no pun intended, to aid Leon on his quest for the president's daughter. Is he just there to make a quick buck, or does he have a stake in the whole crazy scheme? Who knows? All we do know is he has a great voice and some hilariously iconic lines. It's no secret that the Duke from Resident Evil Village was one of my favorite characters in recent memory. And if they can bring that spirit back for the RE4 Merchant, then I'm all about it. Number 3. Reimagined enemies. One of the most fun things about remakes of old games is getting to see the characters constructed with more than 200 polygons. Now, there is something to be said about low-poly horror games and letting your imagination do a lot of the work. But at the same time, I think we can all agree it's also awesome to see the grime, gore, and detail of a grotesque bioweapon as it lunges for your jugular vein. Do any of you remember the reveal trailer of the RE2 Remake and seeing Mr. X's face for the first time? Yeah, me too. Seeing the Ganado, Gigante, Regenerators, and other terrors for the first time is bound to send chills down my spine. Number 2. Weapons. Resident Evil 4 is likely more responsible for igniting a passion for firearms in folks than any of its predecessors. While the Samurai Edge may be the pièce de résistance of RE guns, Leon's handgun, commonly referred to as the Silver Ghost, isn't far behind. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent meticulously searching for base guns and parts to create even a somewhat accurate clone of the Silver Ghost, unfortunately to no avail. Despite the Silver Ghost not being a real gun, RE4 still gives us a hefty dose of real, awesome firearms to whet our appetites. The FN-57 Punisher, the Mauser C96 Red 9, the Steyr TMP, the HK-SL8, and many, many more. Here's to hoping that Capcom does these guns justice in the remakes and adds some more flavorful options in the form of merchant purchases and bonus unlockables. Number 1. Improved horror. Resident Evil 4 has always been a tipping point for the series, the one where they start to lean more heavily into action and focus less on horror. That's not to say there aren't sections of the game with superb atmosphere and scares, because there definitely are. However, the overall feeling I get from the game tends to connect more with the action direction and less with the horror side. The formula seemed to work though, as RE4 quickly became one of Capcom's most celebrated titles. The company began to lose their way a little though, leaning even harder into the action route with subsequent entries into the series. Eventually, the vocal fan base and resurgence of the horror genre thanks to streaming communities would lead to Resident Evil 7, a hard new direction for the series that was praised for its return to its horror roots. The Resident Evil 2 remake further cemented faith in Capcom's ability to create that nostalgic horror atmosphere of the classic games. Capcom would strike gold again in 2021 with Resident Evil Village, capturing both the spirit of RE7 and RE4 with a great setting, atmospheric horror, and some B-movie charm. And this is actually where I hope they dial things back a little. I'm all for some cheesiness in a Resident Evil title. In fact, I'd argue it's necessary. But I'm in the boat that wasn't a huge fan of the boss battle between Ethan and Heisenberg in Resident Evil 8. It just kind of took me out of the whole thing. And I'm definitely not a fan of giant mecha Salazars made out of stone, no matter how iconic that scene might be. Despite this, I'm not asking for the RE4 remake to be dead serious. I want some Leon one-liners. At the same time, I'm excited to see if Capcom takes a more subdued approach to the story and gives us a more realistic and terrifying perspective to what is otherwise a pretty absurd premise for a video game. Well, that's the end of my list. Thank you all for popping in to check out this video, and please feel free to share what you're looking forward to in Resident Evil 4 down in the comments below. And if you are so inclined, leave a like or subscribe. I do all types of Resident Evil content with some emphasis on the firearms. Until next time.